Hey folks, this is Jesse Cope, back with another episode of the American Soul Podcast. Hope y'all are doing well, wherever y'all are and whatever part of the day you're in. Sure do appreciate you joining me, giving a little bit of your time. I'm going to take one of our walks down the road. I have the three-legged wolf along today, and that's it so far. No kitty cats and nobody else, except y'all. For those of y'all that continue to share the podcast, tell others about it, help it to grow, thank you so much. I'm incredibly grateful. And for those of y'all that have joined over on Patreon and any one of the tiers and are financially supporting the podcast, I'm incredibly grateful for that as well. I hope y'all are enjoying the extra podcasts. And Lord, thank you for the time to record this, for those people that listen and share the podcast. Be with them and their families, guide them, give them strength, wisdom, courage, strong faith. Me as well, Lord. Guide the words that I speak. Help them to be the ones that you want. Guide our nation back to you. Help us to wake up to what's going on around us and to get our priorities in order. Father, in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen. So, we're going to get back into this Horace Greeley. And I think we're going to be able to finish this pretty quickly and then maybe make some comments just in general about some of this stuff. If you were here last podcast, we talked about a little excerpt from Horace Greeley's autobiography from the 1860s. And Greeley, again, was a journalist, one of the founders of the Republican Party, instrumental in securing the nomination for Abraham Lincoln. Either founded, or owned, or some combination, the New Yorker magazine and the New York Tribune. So extremely influential in the country at this time. And one of his quotes that we talked about last week was that it was impossible to mentally or socially enslave a Bible reading people because the principles of the Bible were the principles of human freedom. And so, not perfect. Nobody I talk about, including myself doing the talking, is perfect. But certainly his principles are far above what we're getting most of the time from entertainment and culture today. And so this little excerpt here about marriage and divorce, he really goes back to founding principles on the matter. And there's a couple quotes that we read on Friday that I really want to read again, and a couple comments, and then we'll finish up the little excerpt here. The ground has all been traveled over and over, from indissoluble monogamic marriage down through polygamy, concubinage, easy divorce, to absolute free love. Mankind have tried every possible modification and shade of relation between man and woman. If these multiform, protracted, diversified, infinitely repeated experiments have not established the superiority of the union of one man and one woman for life, in short, marriage, to all other forms of sexual relation, then history is a deluding mist, and man has hitherto lived in vain. So basically, we've tried all this stuff. And the comment that struck me last week, or the fragment of this sentence that still strikes me, is free love. You go back to the 60s and 70s, right? But we have nothing that we're trying today is new. It's all been tried and it's all failed, except for marriage between a man and a woman. And so this idea, that we're suddenly enlightened, that we're being progressive, particularly when you talk about feminism and the LGBTQ movement and no-fault divorce, is A, it just shows our ignorance of history, which is vast, and B, our arrogance. If we do know a little bit of history, to think, hey, you know what, everybody else messed it up, but that's because they were all dumber than we are. So we're gonna. It's the same exact thing with communism and socialism. Every single time it's been tried, it's failed, but we're gonna get it right. Or we don't know enough, like our modern generation. We know TikTok and we know Snapchat and we know Instagram and Twitter, but we have no idea about the history of just the 20th century. Because if we did, we would not be acting and living the way that we are. And we have no concept of the Bible anymore. We are not a Bible read people, which some of y'all that listen are going to be saying, well, that's a good thing. No, it's not, especially when the country's founded on those principles. And you can see it today. And that leads into this second, which is given the population of Italy in the days of the Caesars with easy divorce. And I believe the result would be like that experienced by the Roman Republic, which, under the sway of easy divorce, rotted away and perished, blasted by the mildew of unchaste mothers and dissolute homes. So he's talking here, Greeley, about Indiana. This is a back and forth between him and another man in the editorial sections, I think, of the magazine or the Tribune. And he's saying, if you gave the population the same and give it a little time, it's eventually going to falter, just like the Roman Republic did. And this is such a great, we talked about this last Friday, but it's so important because it shows that social downfall always precedes economic and civil downfall, but it always does. When you start to promote, just like we've been doing here in America more and more for the past 80 years, give or take, when you start to promote abortion, murdering your own children, when you start to promote feminism, pretending men and women are the same, and throwing out the roles created by God, when you start to promote LGBTQ relationships as good and wholesome, when you start to promote illegal immigration, bigotry through racism, right, through critical race theory, revisionist history, or when you just ignore history completely, right? All of these social immoralities eventually lead to the fiscal and civil disillusion and uh, just destruction of the republic, which is where we're going. So we're going to finish up the last few paragraphs. If experiments are to be tried in the direction you favor, I insist that they shall be tried fairly, not under cover of false promises and baseless pretenses. Let those who will take each other on trial, but let such unions have a distinct name, as in Paris or Haiti, 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 and let us know just who are married old style and who have formed unions to be maintained or terminated as circumstances shall dictate. Those who choose the latter will, of course, consummate it without benefit of clergy. But I do not see how they need even so much ceremony as that of jumping the broomstick. I'll love you so long as I'm able, and swear for no longer than this. What need is there in any solemnity to hallow such a union? What libertine would hesitate to promise that much, even if fully resolved to decamp next morning? If man and woman are to be true to each other only so long as they shall each find constancy the dictate of their several inclinations, there can be no such crime as adultery, and mankind have too long been defrauded of innocent enjoyment by priestly anathems and ghostly maledictions. Maledictions. Let us each do what for the moment shall give us pleasurable sensations, and let all such fantasies as God, duty, conscience, retribution, eternity be banished to the moles and the bats, with either with other forgotten rubbish of bygone ages of darkness and unreal terrors. But if, as I firmly believe, marriage is a matter which concerns not only the men and women who contract it, but the state, the community, mankind, if its object be not merely the mutual gratification and advantage of the husband and wife, but the due sustenance, nurture, and education of their children, if, in other words, Those who voluntarily incur the obligations of parentage can only discharge those obligations personally and conjointly, and to that end are bound to live together in love, at least until their youngest child shall have attained perfect physical and intellectual maturity. Then I deny that a marriage can be dissolved save by death, or that crime which alone renders it its continence, continuance, impossible. He's talking about adultery there from the Bible, from Jesus, talking about the only valid reason for divorce was sexual infidelity. I look beyond the special case to the general law and to the reason which underlines that law, and I say, no couple can innocently take upon themselves the obligation of marriage until they know that they are one in spirit, and so must remain forever. If they rashly lay profane hands on the ark, theirs alone is the blame, be theirs alone the penalty. They have no right to cast it on that public which admonished and entreated them to forbear, but admonished and entreated in vain. Yours, Horace Greeley, New York, March 5th, 1860. So, lot here. Kind of break it down because I had to read this a few times, so maybe it'll help some of y'all since I'm reading this just once. He's saying if you want to pretend that you can jump in and out of bed with whoever, whenever, and pretend to be married and then decide the next day that you're not, that's fine, but don't call it marriage. You know, you don't even need a priest or a pastor to do that. You just say, hey, we're going to live together as long as it's convenient. And then once we get tired of each other, then, you know, we'll move on. And so he's saying you don't get to use the term marriage, right? Which he said earlier on, we talked about last week. The left has done such a phenomenal job of hijacking the English language, right? So you used to be able to use gay for what it really meant, which is happy and joyous, right? But much like the rainbow, which used to be a symbol of God's love for humanity, it's now a symbol of something immoral and indecent, and therefore evil. And so here again, the left today has really done that in the country, and of course we've allowed it. You want to see the real cause of the problem, we've got to look in the mirror on the patriotic side, right? Marriage, if it's defined by the state, then can be whatever the state decides it is. And that's what's happened. The state says, well, marriage isn't just between one man and one woman. It can be between two men or two women, or, you know, a man and a tree, or a woman and a goat, or whatever you want to say. Because if it's a man-ordained relationship, then men control the definition of it. But if it's a God-ordained relationship, then you can make other things and you can call them whatever you want, but it's not marriage. And so he's saying, you know, if you're going to do this, not only do you throw out, you know, if you're right and marriage can be whatever you want it to be, not only do you throw out marriage, but you throw out God, duty, conscience, retribution, eternity, all these ideas, you throw them into the darkness with the moles and the bats and with the other unreal terrors which have been proven throughout the ages, like the Roman gods, for example, right? So that's the first part. And then his closing paragraph here is so important. He says marriage concerns not only the men and women who contract it, but the state, the community, mankind. It's not merely the mutual gratification and advantage of the husband and wife, but the due sustenance, nurture, and education of their children. And so not only does it affect the man and the woman who do it, it affects the extended family, it affects the community, it affects the local school, it affects the state, it affects the nation, right? And it does, folks. This is one of the real dastardly parts of feminism, is the attack and breakdown of the marriage, because you don't have men and women uh, fulfilling their God-given roles and responsibilities anymore. We're both trying to pretend that we're men. You know, we've become this two-income society, and we've decided, well, we're going to have both people work, and so neither one is raising the kids, and we're going to pay somebody else. We're going to pay them money to raise the kids, right? And we're going to send them off starting as young as 6 weeks old. And so I mean, it's just it's all this whole mess is wrapped up in this. And all you have to do, folks, for those of you that have gone through the pain and heartache and just destruction of divorce, or you know people that have, either way, you know this is true. And this isn't to condemn any of y'all that have been through divorce. This isn't to say, oh, well, you're a failure and you're not worthwhile anymore. That's not at all what Jesus did. You go back to his example with the woman that had five husbands at the well. The point is, folks, we can't keep going down the same road. I go back to this example often of C.S. Lewis. If you're going to make real progress, you have to be going in the direction of truth, of right. And so he uses this example. It's in Mere Christianity. And he says, if you're doing a math problem, and you suddenly realize that you've done something wrong and you're going down the wrong path to get the correct answer, he said, the quickest way to get the right answer is to turn around and go back to the point in the problem where you went wrong, whatever step that was, and start from there again, right? He uses a different analogy. It's like traveling down a road. And all of a sudden you realize, man, I took a wrong turn, maybe two or three or four or however many, and I'm way off course. Well, the quickest way to get back on course is to turn around and go back to the very first point that you made a wrong turn and make a right turn, a correct turn. And that's what we've got to do here going forward. We've made the mistakes, all of those things I listed earlier: abortion, feminism, LGBTQ relationships, illegal immigration, critical race theory, identity politics, socialism, communism, more and more government control and power at the federal level, right? All of these things we've tried, and they're wreaking havoc on our country, on our families. Again, you were talking about divorce in particular here, but it applies to all of them. You see this. I say this so often. If you don't believe it, or you think I'm not telling the truth, go find a local school, any grade will do, and ask them if you can just sit there and observe for a couple weeks. And or go, they probably won't look real kindly on that, but you could volunteer to be a substitute teacher. It won't take long, folks, just a few times. So just tell your boss you need a couple weeks off, and go be a substitute teacher for about 2 or 3 weeks, and you'll get all the information you need to see that these are factual statements, that this is really what's going on. It's destroying our country. And so, talking about marriage and divorce here, and the relationship to your extended family, your state, your community, your schools, the nation as a whole, right? This last part right here, it's really so condemning for so many of us. We put all this effort into, and I think this is probably, yeah, this is where we'll wrap up. But look, if we have time, we talk about this so often on this podcast, and it's probably about time to come back and do another priorities podcast. But if we have time for our phones, and we have time for Amazon Prime, Netflix, Hulu, and we have time to watch a football game or two or three each week, or volleyball or baseball, basketball, softball, doesn't matter, tennis, match, golf. If we have time for all this, to work out each day, but we don't have time for God and we don't have time for our spouse, the problem isn't God and it's not our spouse. The problem is us. And so part of this problem is we put all this time and effort into, well, where are we going to go to college, or what job am I going to get, or what am I going to do, X, Y, and Z? How much, what do I need to eat to really make my body feel better? What workouts do I need to do to get stronger in this manner, to do this, accomplish this task? What about me? What about my self-care? What about, I want to go run this marathon. I want to run this Ironman. I want to compete in America, Ninja Warrior, whatever. It doesn't even matter, folks. You pick your poison. We put all this time and effort into these things, but with marriage, we kind of just look around and go, yeah, that looks good. And most of us, even those of us that, and this shrinks the population pretty good already, that took the time to go to marriage counseling before, we didn't really treat it seriously. We didn't really talk to God. We didn't really say, hey, is this a good idea from both sides, man and woman? Is this what you want us to do? We didn't look at the really deep connection level, the things that were important in the marriage, like what are your goals in life? What do you see the roles and responsibilities? What is your ideology really like? What are your beliefs, your core beliefs? We said, hey, you and I have a good time together. You look pretty good. Well, yeah, you look pretty good too. Well, maybe we should get married. Yeah. Well, how many kids do you want to have? I don't know. We can talk about that. Yeah, that sounds good. Right? I mean, if most of us are honest, that's kind of how it went down, really the shortened version. There's obviously exceptions to that where you marry somebody and you really feel like you know them deep, deep down and you've had all these vital conversations and you've talked to God and then all of a sudden something really goes haywire. But what he's saying here at the end, and I'll wrap up, is he's saying, look, if you did that, and this goes back to a proverb from Proverbs in the Bible, don't make a vow rashly and then only later consider the consequences of that vow. Just because we made a rash decision and got into a marriage that we shouldn't have gotten into, and we should have known better and would have known better if we would have taken the time to really focus on what was important instead of chasing a paycheck or a skirt or whatever you want to call it, that doesn't give us the right to demand no fault divorce, to demand divorce, however, free love, whatever you want to say, to get out of that, right? That's the problem that we see. And we're able to identify it in other areas, right? Like you have this business that's spent way more money than they should have. And we go, well, we're not bailing you out. It's the same problem with the college forgiveness we're talking about here. When you go into college, it shouldn't just be, well, where can I go and have the best time? It should be even more than, well, this is what I really want to do. What college offers the best at that? It's got to be, okay, I get this degree. This is what I want to do. Now, when I get out, what jobs can I actually get? And am I going to enjoy those jobs as much as I think I'm going to enjoy studying this? And are they going to be able to pay off the loans that I've incurred going to school X? And if the answer is no to any of those, then you need to rethink where you're going to school or if you're going to school. Just like you need to go through that stuff before you get married. And it's not the responsibility of the rest of society to pay the price for you not asking, for us not asking ourselves that question. We got in the bad school, or we got in the bad marriage because we didn't ask the right questions. Well, guess what? Now made you've signed a contract. Even more than that, you've dedicated not only to yourself and this person you're with, but to God in front of your community to stick with it. And so you have to. And man, isn't that a message? Don't some of you think that that's a message that we need to pass on to our kids before they make the same mistakes that we made? Because can you imagine anything more heartbreaking other than eternity in hell than making the wrong decision there? I can't. All right, folks, I took way more than I was supposed to. God be with y'all. God bless y'all. God bless your families. God bless America. We'll talk to you all again real soon. Looking forward to it.